Welcome back, Focus Learners. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining me for today's explainer because we're going to do something really cool. We are going to bridge the gap between academic reading standards and actual real-world application. Today, we're looking specifically at a Grade 7 English focus, the poetry application task. Now, if you've ever found yourself wondering how those seemingly abstract rules of middle school literacy actually translate into the critical thinking skills we use every single day, well, you are in exactly the right place. We're going to decode the framework that turns students into independent, analytical thinkers.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is a quick look at our roadmap. We'll start by decoding Grade 7 standards, then explore the power of evidence. After that, analyzing poetry, craft, and structure, followed by modeling the application task, and finally, mastering transfer practice. This clear structure is going to take us from abstract theories straight into concrete practice.
All right, Section 1, Decoding Grade 7 Standards. Let's set up the rules of the game.
Before we can really analyze a poem, we have to understand the foundation of 7th grade literacy using the Common Core framework. Take a listen to this foundational quote right from the Common Core introduction. They value evidence. Students cite specific evidence when offering an oral or written interpretation of a text. It's a huge shift, right? College and career readiness literally starts with this exact mindset. It demands that readers habitually perform critical analysis instead of just passively absorbing words on a page. You aren't just a reader anymore. You are an investigator.
Which brings us right to the ultimate goal: comprehending complex texts independently and building strong, evidence-based reasoning. This is the absolute core of what students need to take away from 7th grade English language arts. I mean, think about it. When someone can look at a dense, complicated text, whether that's a 19th century poem or a modern breaking news article, and independently break it down using cold, hard evidence, they've basically unlocked a superpower. They can navigate the staggering amount of information thrown at us today with total clarity and confidence.
Moving on to Section 2, the power of evidence. It is time to start thinking like a detective, building an airtight case.
If reading really is an investigation, well, we need to build that case. And here is the defining standard for this skill, RL 7.1. Cite several pieces of textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is that word several. In earlier grades, finding just one detail might have been enough to get by. But in grade 7, one single clue just doesn't cut it. A good detective needs multiple pieces of proof to back up what the text says outright and to support those logical leaps, those inferences they're making between the lines.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why an evidence-based claim solves the mystery while an opinion just falls flat. Look at the difference here. On the one hand, you have an opinion-based weak claim. I think the poem is sad. It's vague. It relies completely on a gut feeling. But on the other side, the poem's tone is melancholic, evidenced by the author's repeated use of weeping and the dark setting in stanza 2. Boom! This claim doesn't just state a feeling. It points directly to the architecture of the text to prove its point. It solves the mystery by bringing in multiple, specific pieces of evidence.
Let's ramp up the energy. Section 3, Analyzing Poetry, Craft, and Structure. We are moving from what a poem says to how it's actually built.
To do this, we rely heavily on standards RL 7.4 and RL 7.5. These ask us to look at specific word choices, rhymes, sound repetitions, and structural forms, like how a poem is broken up into stanzas, and figure out how they contribute to the poem's overall meaning and tone. Think of it like this. Poets are incredibly economical with their language. Every single word, every line break, every rhyme, it's a deliberate, calculated tool the poet uses to craft their underlying message. Literally nothing is put there by accident.
Now, what's really interesting about how these elements break down is that they essentially act as a master cheat sheet for decoding a poem's mechanics. Rhyme and alliteration aren't just there to sound pretty, They create rhythm, emphasize specific feelings, or even accelerate the pacing to build tension. Then you have form and stanzas, which visually group ideas together, signal a shift in time, or highlight a turning point. And of course, connotative word choice, those words carrying all that heavy emotional baggage. They directly shape the reader's emotional response and build the underlying mood. Once you know what these tools do, reading poetry becomes a highly engaging puzzle.
Okay, let's deliberately slow down the pace just a bit for Section 4, Modeling the Application Task. I invite you to closely follow the logic here.
The ultimate destination of our analytical journey in any poetry task is governed by standard RL 7.2. We have to determine a theme or central idea of a text, analyze how it develops from the very first stanza to the last, and be able to provide an objective summary. And remember, objective is key. It means leaving our personal biases at the door. We aren't summarizing how the poem made us feel. We're summarizing the verifiable, thematic journey the author created. So let's walk through this modeled application task step by step. Step 1, you read carefully to determine that central theme. What is this poem really about at its core? Step 2, you analyze the poetic structure and specific connotative word choices. Basically, how did the author build that theme? And step 3, you cite several pieces of exact textual evidence. You pull quotes directly from the text to prove your structural analysis. Notice how beautifully these abstract standards combine? They create a highly practical, foolproof method for tearing down and deeply understanding any complex piece of literature.
Let's move to seeing how this builds into the specific actions a student takes during this task. Our student detective has to pinpoint the exact stanzas where the mood shifts. They need to extract the exact quotes that feature that heavy, connotative language or alliteration. Most importantly, they must physically connect those specific quotes directly back to the central theme they identified, all while ensuring personal judgments are entirely left out. They're literally connecting the structural clues to solve the overarching thematic case. It's rigorous, it's evidence-based, and man, it's incredibly rewarding when it clicks.
But that brings up a really fantastic question. How do we apply these evidence-based skills elsewhere? I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. You probably aren't going to spend your entire adult life analyzing 19th century poetry stanzas. So why does this highly specific analytical method actually matter to the focused learner outside the English classroom?
That brings us to Section 5, Mastering Transfer Practice. And this is where things get really exciting.
Because this is where the magic happens. This is how those 7th grade literacy skills bridge directly into everyday life. The standards we just unpacked aren't just about poems, they are about parsing information. When you know how to demand several pieces of textual evidence, you can rigorously critique historical primary sources. When you know how to analyze craft and structure, you can evaluate the validity of scientific claims to see if the data actually supports the conclusion. You use these exact same skills to construct persuasive, unshakable arguments in real-world debates, and critically to analyze digital media and news articles for underlying bias and connotative manipulation. The ability to find a central theme and demand evidence, that makes you an independent, critical thinker in literally any subject you encounter.
So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder today. How does mastering this kind of structural, evidence-based reasoning change the way you view the media you consume every single day? Once you start looking for the structural choices, the connotative words, and the required evidence in a news broadcast or a social media feed, you really can't unsee it. You are no longer just a passive consumer of information, you are an active, empowered analyzer of the world around you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep looking for the evidence.